We're joined by Gwyn Milne on the couch. Thanks for joining us, Gwyn. Gwyn, you've held many and various titles and positions over many years and ministries, including advisory boards, Whitley College Council. You were president of not only the Baptist Union of Victoria, but also the Baptist Union of Australia. You served on the Baptcare board, and you've been an associate pastor, and you also served on the Baptist World Aid of Australia board. Have I left anything out?
No, I don't think so. That's plenty.
That's quite an impressive list. Now, I just want you to take us back to the 1980s, which is where your ministry probably started.
Yes.
Now, Gwyn, I was in primary school in the 1980s, and I thought the 1980s were fantastic. But would you like to explain a little bit about what life was like with regard to women in ministry back in the 80s?
Well, if I was in primary school in the 1980s, it would have been teaching,
Right.
as I was a primary teacher.
Wow.
But I think back in the 1980s, there were women in leadership in ministry, but it was very much within the context of women's ministry.
Right.
There was a strong stream of women's ministries in most Baptist churches, and that's where the leadership sprang from, although I didn't really ever come through that route. It just happened. It was about the time when, not long after Marita Munro had been allowed to become a minister, and she's a wonderful woman, that one.
Yeah.
There were really no models of women in leadership in pastoral ministry or in church ministry other than in the women's stream. Theologically and culturally, there was a lot of opposition to women being in leadership, and it was about the time when Germaine Greer really became quite overt, and the whole women's movement was took off, really, yes. There were rising demands from women about their role in society, and I was never actually one of those people, but I did think that there were probably opportunities for women that really should be taken. There were, as I said, there was a huge scarcity of models for women in ministry, and there was also not a great deal of acceptance of women in the workforce even back then. These days they talk about how can a family manage on one income. Back then it was, you always managed on one income, and society was just geared for the single income family. So my role was, as a woman, was very much as Mrs. Grassroots back then.
Thanks for sharing a bit about life in the 80s, and it sounds like you appreciate how far we've come in many ways as women leaders.
I think there's been a tremendous change since the 1980s, yes.
What would you say were the biggest barriers or blessings to your ministry as a woman?
Blessings? Well, I love being able to be just me, and I never tried to be anything. I didn't ever want to be a bloke. I love being a woman, and to be offered the opportunity when I seemed to have the gifting of leadership. As a woman, I just felt that it was a real blessing to be a woman in leadership.
Fantastic.
Another blessing I've found was the way, as I'm older now, that I can look back on women who followed me and see how well they've done. Because I've always felt that I'm not very wonderful, but if I can encourage people who do things better than me, nothing delights me more.
That's wonderful.
So that's a couple of the blessings. What was the other
What about
one?
the barriers?
The barriers. Oh, numerous. Yes. I didn't know how to behave in a man's world, particularly. I only ever had one sister, didn't have any boys in my house.
Right.
I had children, but I was basically a woman, and I didn't get a great deal of acceptance in the very early days. A lot of stereotypical behaviour, that women did this and men did this, and there was no crossover.
There's real gender-specific roles.
Very much so. I was raised that way, and for a long time I thought that's the way it was. But I could see this beginning to change, and when I was basically tapped on the shoulder to enter a man's world, in the very first one was probably through advisory board. I joined an all-male group of older men. I was younger than them all, and
were you well accepted into that group?
It varied. There was one person who was known to have said, "Well, now we have a woman on the board, we need to be a lot more concerned about confidentiality."
Right.
Which really upset me. And when at that time we had leaders from the churches coming in looking for pastors, and they would actually, I can remember one particular night, one of the deacons from the church came in and said, when I asked the question about the demographics of the area where the church was set, and he looked at me and he said, "I would prefer you ask your questions only about women's work, please."
Wow.
And that was not so good either.
So a little bit of opposition.
A lot of opposition, because Baptists are not particularly brave at making change, or weren't particularly brave at making changes then. And it was because I'm theologically conservative. I've always been in a reasonably conservative Baptist church, so I didn't fit
the mould.
No, I didn't fit the mould.
Yeah. You would have been a rebel.
Well, I didn't act. I don't think I acted rebelliously. I made a decision that I would just be quietly doing what I had to do, and
people obviously saw potential in you if you were asked to contribute on these boards.
Well, it was the fellas who in the very beginning were wonderful. A group, and they weren't a group; they were just individual men who were the best feminists you could imagine. People like Tony Cupid, who was the Daniel equivalent at the time. He's the one who first approached me about the advisory board. Later on, John Simpson, and John was wonderful. He and I worked together very closely over many, many years. Dr. Ken Manley, when I started at Wickley, I did some theological study at Wickley. He was quietly very affirming. Harry Munro, who was in the local church, where we were lay people in the church, and later I joined his pastoral team at Templestowe Church. Another one very affirming.
So you definitely had some champions on your side.
I did, and I have to mention Colin Hunter, because I looked for a long time, Reverend Dr. Colin Hunter, I looked for a long time for a mentor, and there were none. And I'm very strongly in favour of ministry, people having mentors to keep them on track and sort of
spiritually on track and personally on track.
All that, and I couldn't find one until I did find Colin came to me and he said, "I will mentor you." I appreciated that. And another one was Sheila Wilkin, who headed up Caringia Counselling Service at Sydney. Another wonderful woman. So I was very honoured in the end. good mentors.
Lovely. Now, in what ways can you see God's hand at work in your ministry now? So tell us what's involved in your life right now.
Well, now I sit in the pews. I've retired, and I have had to make a new route for myself, I'd say. Probably we've moved into a retirement village in the last couple of years, and I now realise that I'm on a mission field, and there's so much to do,
yeah.
and people to meet, and older people to help them with some of the things that they wonder about life. And particularly as you get toward where there's a lot more likelihood of end of life stuff. So I'm sort of jogging along in there. Still not very involved in the local church, Croydon Hills, although Gary, my husband, and I are both often on the door, greeters, and we run a small group which we love. But no, I don't have any formal role anymore.
But you've done a lot in your lifetime.
I think everybody, by the time they get old like me, they have done that.
That's a very impressive list of the things that you've been involved in, Gwyn. Now, one of the things that you've said that you've learned about the role of equality in women in leadership is that good women want to be accepted because of their gifting, not because of their gender. As you reflect back on your journey, what advice would you give to those women starting out?
Oh, look, I've thought about this last night, and I've actually made a little list here.
Right, go ahead.
Because I thought I don't want to miss them. One thing is, don't race into ministry without knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So know yourself very well. Your gifting and your passion, and also, are you really called? Because if you go into ministry with the wrong motives, it doesn't really work very well. You also need to know exactly what ministry is, and I think it's easy for people to want to be in ministry and not know what that really means, because ministry is hard work and it never ends. The best thing I did when I retired was I painted a door, which meant I could start it and finish it. I'd forgotten what it was like to finish something. I think you've got to look at your season of life. I've just recently met with a lovely younger lady who's trying to do massive things, and she's got 2 little good children at the same time. And I really do think it's a really good idea to look at your season of life and look at your life, your whole life.
As a whole. Not just this little snippet in time.
Because you get so easy to be overcommitted.
And to be discouraged that you can't achieve when you've got other commitments on your plate.
Yes, that's right. And waiting is quite acceptable. I mean, it seems like you can't wait, but actually waiting a bit, there's lots of time, really, and you do it better. Another thing I strongly feel this, I think for a good leader, you need to be tested as a follower, as a team member, and as a leader. And I've discovered that right from childhood, when I was first a class captain, and that sort of thing.
When you're at the early days of your leadership qualities perhaps coming out.
I did. I think my grade 4 teacher, I've got to thank him for, because he urged me on in patterns of leadership. But I think we've got to be good followers and good team members to be really good leaders. I'm strong about that. Consider your priorities as a mum and a wife. Someone who loves the Lord, you've got to keep your work-life balance in order. And women are not often not real good at that because they tend to pick up whatever's left, which can be too much sometimes. Having a mentor, I've mentioned that one before.
Very important.
Learning when to say yes and when to say no. I've always been a yes person. Always said yes unless I've had a really good reason. Because I've asked people to do things and they always say no. So I thought, oh, I'll say yes unless I have to say no. But now I'm older, I think I'm glad I can say no.
Yeah.
And the last one is expect some disappointments. Because that's life.
Yeah, they will come. Yeah.
But you don't get less disappointments when you trust in the Lord anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's such great advice, such great points you've been able to share with us this afternoon. And we thank you so much for your time.
Good. My pleasure.